And crime and violence must stop.
Yeah, bless up to everybody, and thanks for tuning in back again to the Nicardo Media House platform. I'm here with a morning Saturday extra. No morning Saturday this morning. What happened, last night on the Nick and Dan podcast, drive me crazy. So many stuff that we talk about. I was just literally mentally, physically tired. I just went to bed, right after the stream and just relax my mind and just say, hey, I will drop this video, later Monday evening. I'm here again, ready to talk about the relegation boys. Yes, the relegation boys, the boys that fighting for relegation with their club team. And I'm also actually going to touch up, a little bit on the Mason Greenwood, some little issues. I watched that game over the weekend as well versus Montpellier, a game that they played at home. They dominate the game as well, but there's some little factors in the game. I actually have a report as well, to let you guys listen about, what is going on with Mason at his club, and then I'm going to give my opinion and 2 cents on the report and what I think. But right after this, I will jump into the video. But again, people, that's upon yourself. Thanks for contributing to the channel. Really appreciate it. Remember, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate it. And right after this, I will jump into the video. Mason Greenwood, such is always story around Mason Greenwood. There's always story around Mason Greenwood, and this one is all about what they said allegedly, the players, been reporting, to technical director, to owner, to coach about, there's so much story, there's so much negativity, surrounding, Mason Greenwood, the Marseille team. A couple days ago, Roberto De Zerbi came out and said, he will, fly the team to Italy, to continue their training and to focus on their road to get into a Champions League, automatically qualifying spot in the French Liga. They beat Montpellier, 5-1. They beat them, I think 5-1, 5-0. They have done that same exact result in previous game. Mason Greenwood, scored in previous game as well versus Montpellier. So this is nothing, new, with Marseille playing Montpellier. But that's not the story. The story is what is going on, what the players have said, with, technical director, owners, and this is what the report has to say.
Marseille sporting director Mehdi Benatia has furiously denied claims that 2 senior players have refused to play with Mason Greenwood. Despite being the club's top scorer, the former Manchester United star has been the subject of several damning recent reports that have raised questions over his attitude. The most recent of which alleges that senior Marseille players, former Tottenham midfielder Pierre-Emile Højbjerg and ex-Paris Saint-Germain star Adrien Rabiot have refused to play alongside the forward. Benatia strenuously refuted the claims and sensationally alleged that some within the club are trying to sow discord. Benatia fumed at rumours that Højbjerg, in his first season with the club after departing North London, went to his office and called for the removal of Greenwood and Luis Enrique from Marseille's squad.
Yes, congratulations already for this match, because it's needed the word that you said, seriousness, and the confidence that will return. Speaking of confidence, I really like the match and Mason Greenwood. I think these 2 are key players in our squad. If these 2 players play on THIER talent, I think we can go all way because they are decisive players who win matches. And I thought I saw a good Greenwood. How is he in terms of confidence? And of terms morals? No, but it's true that Mason is a shy bit of a shy boy. We all know it's, and everyone has their personality differently. But he's a boy who brings us a lot of goods, a lot of quality. And if the team also knows to put him well, he too on his own, he will put himself in situations which will actually make the team win or bring the team forward too.
And then, the ultras putting up a banner. Then I saw the banner with Mason Greenwood. I saw the banner name with Luis Enriquez as well. But, I don't speak French. But right after the game, I think just before the game finished, I saw a translation, on social media of what the banner name, need to move on. This is what happened. The team went into a very bad patch, before the last 2 sets of results that they got, the wins that they got. now they got back-to-back win, in their season again. They were on a very, very bad patch. I think the month of March was a miserable one for them. I don't think they won any game in the month of March. So the fans were upset. The fans were, thinking about looming. There will be no, Champions League, berth for the Marseille team. They want to qualify for the Champions League after a very impressive, start of the new campaign. Very impressive start, with Roberto De Zerbi, man. Very impressive start with Mason Greenwood, and they welcome him, in south of France, and why now want him to move on, but this is ultras, they will always voice their opinion, they will always have this concern, but with him continue to score, he will definitely win the heart of, the ultras, the Marseille fans that who want to turn against him. But the reports that continue to fly in around Mason Greenwood, the allegedly, the stories that flying around, and this is nothing new. Didier Drogba have went through something similar like this. Bafémeti Gomez, players like this have went through crisis with the ultras, went through crisis with the media that covering Marseille, and generally media's out there that developing stories where there's nothing around it, just speculation. And Benatia came out and he cleared the air and a lot of these stuff, and that's all I have to say. Like, a lot of these stuff that Mason is moving forward. No, I don't think Mason will go forward. I think with a fresh contract. I even see, I think it was in November, his girlfriend, I think when they were expecting another child, something after that, she came out, and she's very comfortable in Marseille, very comfortable of south of France, so they're finding life a lot more easier, they're fitting in, and they're relaxing now. So I don't think a move away, from Marseille is on the card at the moment. They love him, the owners, the people brought him in, they love him. He's a talent, they know what he can bring to the table, and they actually getting it at this moment. So with what his contract, he has a contract on the line, I think, until 2020, 29, with another year option, to extend that contract, so I don't think he will move on. I just think it's just a lot of noises around Mason Greenwood at this moment, and another thing that I want to say as well, I got a phone call, this morning from a prominent figure, that a YouTuber, someone that who cover Central American, and he said he was actually listening to a Guatemalan radio program where they were actually talking about Mason Greenwood, potentially that he cleared to play for the Reggae Boyz. And I saw that report, and the article that mainly pushing that you will say that news out there, that article is from Guatemala. I have said this last night on the Nick and Dan podcast. They are pushing that agenda, and I'm not saying they're not credible. I don't know where they get their source from. I'm not saying they're wrong or they're true, but they are the ones that pushing that news out there that Mason Greenwood is cleared. And it's glad to see a local newspaper back home in Jamaica have tried to get some clarification on it. And the team manager Reid Simpson actually spoken about, and he actually said, look, there's no movement, everything is at where it was months ago. The family let them know, hey, just keep everything tightly, and and when things ready to publish, it will go. But that Guatemalan media outlet, they are the one that running with that news. I don't know where they got it from. I don't know where they got the source or how that developed over the last probably 72 hours. I understand the last 3 to 4 days, but it's in the news. I got a call from one of my friend, that who do YouTube, someone that who journalist work, for Central American media companies out there, that talking about the Mason Greenwood, potentially that he cleared for the Reggae Boy team. Even when you go on Google, you see it's just popping up on the AI side, but again, we're going to move on and talk about the players that are in the relegation zone, and will they play in a next division coming up next season in 25-20-26 season. Bobby Reid, is another one. This is his second time, getting relegation, relegated, from the Premier League. It happened in 2018-19 season, with Cardiff, and it happened in the COVID era where, he got relegated with Fulham in 2020-21 season. And he's a player, every time when he's playing, in the championship, he always played, some wonderful football. He always get a lot of minutes, but he got relegated with Cardiff. No, he got relegated he got relegated with Leicester City. So Leicester City is the third team, in Bobby Reid's career that he's getting relegated from the Premier League with another team, Cardiff, Leicester, and Fulham. And you will say, look, his last couple of seasons, in the EFL Championship, 2017-18 season, 46 game, 17 goals scored, 7 assists for Bristol City, and also, for another team. I think it was at the time, it was Fulham. During the time, the promotion season before they get promoted to the Premier League, that same season, 45 games played, 6 goals and 4 assists. And the latest one was 21-20-22 when Fulham got relegated in the COVID era. They went down 2021-2022, 41 games played, 8 goals scored and 7 assists. So he's someone that, tend to perform, in the championship. And you would say maybe, a relegation might do Bobby Reid really well because he didn't really get the best of start, at Leicester City. Again, change of managers wouldn't suit him that well. Steve Cooper brought him in. He was Steve Cooper first signing for Leicester City, and Ruud van Nistelrooy came in. So different managers, different system, and I know, at the end of the Premier League season, he started to get a little bit more game time. He scored a couple goals, he made a couple assists. So he have bright moments for Leicester City, but going down at this moment, in the championship, a game time is not a problem, because his last couple season that I just give you, his statistics around the last 3 seasons, he averaged 44 games in the championship. And the championship, a team can only play a maximum of 46 games in the regular season. So with him average, 44 games in his last couple seasons in the championship, that show you that, he tend to play the games. And look, he always get on the score sheet, and then when you look at it, World Cup is coming around, you will say, is it the perfect time for him to play in a championship in a league that's he can match up to that quality? I know Bobby Reid is maybe 32, 33, somewhere 32 in that age bracket, but he will definitely perform, for Leicester City. And with him just signed a 3-year deal on the line with Leicester City, he will play in the championship, so he's not shy away from, getting relegated and play in the championship with that team as well. Moving on from Bobby Reid, I'm going to talk about one that it's just, I think this is the only one that I want to happen, so bad. Ronaldo Cephas, Ankara Gochu have lost again to a team that was in, I think, 17th position, 1 position below them before a ball was kicked in the last, not the previous game that they played. I think it was the previous game that they played. Yes, the previous game that they played, before a ball kick, the team was sitting right behind them by 2 points. Now the team is actually 1 point above them and outside of the relegation zone. So for the first time this season, Ronaldo Cephas' team find themselves in the relegation zone. And why I want this to happen so bad, I think for his age, mid-20s, 25, 26, this is the right time for him to move forward with his career. This is another change of scenery. Get into a different league, get to that different coach where you can get the best out of him. But Ankara go to have 3 games left back, and the 3 games that they have left back, they have only beat the 3 games they have left back. One of those fixtures, they only beat that team 1 time, in the entire season. The next 2 teams, they draw and lost, so things are not in their favorable moment at this time, and those 3 games are teams that fighting for playoff, to get into the playoff, to fight for another spot to get into the Turkish Super League. So those teams are at a higher position, and teams that's very tough, so it's a miserable time with Cephas at that club. And then moving on from Ronaldo Cephas, I'm going to talk about Damion Lowe, in the Saudi Pro League, someone that his contract will run out in 2026, the year when the World Cup will begin, and his team is down there, and he have like 6 games left back. I think they have like 5-6 games left back. They have fixtures amongst teams that in the drop and teams that up on the other side of the table, where they're looking to play in the AFC Championship, so it's going to be a tough task, to Damion Lowe. What will happen with Damion Lowe if his team get relegated? I think his team will get relegated. I don't see them getting much points, to escape that relegation zone. Another player, moving from Damion Lowe from the the Saudi Pro League back to the Championship, Greg Leigh, Oxford. Greg Leigh just came back in the last 3 games. He came back. I think he played us a minute in the game versus Sheffield. He got 25 minutes in previous game. The last game he got I think he came on I think around 46 minutes. So he's getting minutes, he's getting back there. But when you look at Greg Leigh, Greg Leigh, Luton Town, Marseille, All City, Casey Palmer, they are right there. Yeah, let me just pull up this a little bit more and get some more information. Yeah, they are right there. And Greg Leigh next team, their next game will be at home versus Sunderland. And this team, Oxford, got promoted from League One, where they got promoted last season. They're in a championship, and they might be back down into League One football. And Greg Leigh, I remember if Greg Leigh have, I think, 1 more year left back on his contract. Luton Town, Maribel, this is his final year. He have already gone through relegation zone in the Premier League, facing back-to-back relegation zone for the first time. Look, Luton Town, they have done some very good work in the last couple of match days. They beaten Derby County away. They won the last fixtures over the Easter break as well. Who they beat? Luton Town. I forgot who they beat, but they getting points, and it's just 2 games left. And they have 2 teams that will be played. They have two teams left that who is fighting for promotional spots. So it's going to be tough. It will be gutted to see to Maribel to experience back-to-back relegation. From the Premier League. To League One, so it's going to be tough. Casey Palmer is another player. I'm going to touch on him as well, but let me get to Greg Leigh. Greg Leigh team Oxford is just 3 points from the top. Luton Town is in 22. There's 3 points above Luton Town, and it's going to be chaos because Sunderland at home. Greg Leigh is just getting back into the team. You don't want him to get in the relegation, but I just feel like a Reggae Boyz player will get relegated from the Championship season this season, and one of those players will be playing in League One football coming next season. But but with Maribel, his contract situation, not yet anything around his contract. His contract will finish at the end of the season. And look, let me get to Casey Palmer a bit. But Casey, when he get his opportunities, after he came back from that lengthy break, he had an ankle injury that he sustained. I think it was in December, and not much, he's given Ruben Selles for that All City manager that he can turn around, he can help. I know the manager have the trust. The manager came out in previous, a couple of months ago and speak highly of Casey Palmer that, he want him to stay back, for the international break and work on himself to help this team get stronger, to fight off, the relegation zone teams and find himself in a more safety position. But things haven't been, the way that Ruben Selles want Casey Palmer to be around. I know he got a says, I think at West Brom Stadium when they played West Brom, came off the bench, made an impact, but his inconsistency, is playing a big part of his downfall of not getting, consistent run, starting in this Hull City team. And as an international, I think he should be starting in a struggling Hull City team, but because he's such a poor fella on the pitch, he's just not getting that moment. But his League One football will suit Casey because he just signed up. He just left Coventry over the summer to sign with Hull City. Hull City is on the wrong side of the table. Last season when Liam Russell here have this team just a couple of points, finish in the championship away from a playoff spot. So he was signed up for a team that was pushing for promotion, pushing for a playoff spot in the championship. Now this team is facing League One football. This is how quick football can turn in your career. So the decisions that you made, you have to be really precise and it have to be very immaculate. But again, Casey Palmer, 3 year, on his contract. I think maybe League One football will suit Casey Palmer, especially a World Cup year, especially, you want to just build back your confidence. I think League One, that's his level at this moment to get back his confidence, get back, and win the hearts of the Tigers fans. If Ruben Sellers get relegated, I don't think he will be the manager, a new manager, a new setup again for Casey Palmer. But again, another player, a team that who have fight off their last 3 rivals to be outside of the relegation zone. Isaak, who is on loan at Portsmouth. In their last 3 games, they got 2 wins and 1 draw. That's 7 points. So they are 8 points away from the job with just 3 games or 2. Some team have 3 and 2 games left back. They are safe. So you say Isaak have done it again. What he have done the last time for QPR help them to be safe in the championship. No, Isaak help Portsmouth to be safe. Not his best, but it's a work in progress. I don't think he's playing at that level where a lot of the Pompey's fans were expecting him to play, because coming from the Premier League, drop down for a team that just getting promoted to to the championship from League One, they're expecting a higher level, but not so much. But they can understand a player that I don't want to find much excuse for him, but a player that is coming from a bad situation where he's not getting game time under his belt, so maybe is that. But again, this summer will be a big summer for Isaak. And next up, Trevante Stewart and Kenry Campbell in the Serbian league. Both players are teams are right in the mix. Trevante Stewart is in the top 10 of the most goals scored by a player in the Serbian Super League this season. They are in the phase of the relegation zone where they played the bottom half of the teams in the Serbian Super League. Kenry team is just a point or 2 away from the relegation zone, but Trevante Stewart team is down in the job. And from Mount Pleasant to Salernitana, to another team, he was on loan in the Serbian league. Now at this team to face relegation, with him score double-digit goal and a couple assists, you will say maybe a team that in that league are another team that's in a different country somewhere close by will probably see that talent and say, hey, remember number 9 is very short at this moment, so for him to score 10 goals in the Serbian Super League this season in a very struggling team, he might do something good, he might do something properly, and then Kenry, just sign up with this team will be devastated for him. He's on a longer term contract. I think he had 3 more years left back on his contract, so he's one for the long term for this club. He's a player that they're looking for the window to get a big profit off in the next couple of transfer windows to come, maybe at the end of next season of the 2025-26 season, if they're relegation zone or relegated back down to Division 1 in Serbian football, then they can maybe cash in. But at this moment, I don't think Kenry Campbell, the team will cash in on him, as less a team that really know about him and scout him properly and know what he can bring. Say, hey, we need him, and they come in and, you know, pay the asking price that this team is asking for, that's the only way I could see Kenry Campbell leave that club at the moment. You know, he's one for the future at 22 years old. But yeah, that's it, you know, people. You know, see you guys, you know, tomorrow, you know, with the Morning Insider, you know, talking about more stuff again. But yeah, that's it around Mason Greenwood and the boys that are in the relegation zone for their football club at their club. You understand? But thanks for watching. This is Nicardo Media House. You know, remember, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Really appreciate it. Salute. I'm out.